Being
Slide over.
6 o'clock, we'll call the meeting to order.
You be calling order.
Oh yeah, you
Yeah,
guys,
we will call the cab to order.
great. The meeting's being audio recorded and held remotely on Zoom. And is it being carried live on RCTV as well?
Yes.
Is there any, we could open up with public comment. Is there any public comment?
No one in the room.
It's here. Okay. Then I guess we just move on with our agenda.
We have, for the cab, the first item is, approval of the, meeting minutes. So, that's want to read the motion.
Move that the RMLD Citizen Advisory Board approve the February 22nd, 2024 open session meeting minutes as presented on the recommendation of the general manager and the board secretary.
Second.
Second.
Okay, so all in favor?
Aye.
I'll abstain. I was not present for that meeting. So passes 3-0, 1 absent.
You guys all set?
Yep.
Okay. So next we have our in-territory solar. Bill?
Yes. Yep. So I just want to run through there are a lot of projects going on now, and I just wanted to focus on the solar opportunity in our territories and our towns and what we're doing to make sure that we maximize.
Great, thank you.
This
Should be. You imagine that's right.
Oh, it's not on.
oh so there are basically 3 types of solar that we're looking at. The first is ground mount, that's typical solar farm. The benefits are it has economies of scale, they're larger plants, so the fixed cost spread over more megawatts, so there tends to be a lower installed cost per megawatt hour produced. And we're actively developing several projects. One, of course, Maple Meadows. We're also recently met with the Linfield Water Board, where they approved us developing a solar plant there next to one of their new pumping stations. And then we're looking at a number of Wilmington parcels that might be applicable for ground mount solar. And we think the total potential is somewhere between 10 and 20 megawatts in our service territory. And we're also teaming with the municipality. So we are talking to all of them about adding solar onto schools, with the water district in Linfield about adding it to the pumping station building. We're looking at the middle and high school in North Reading, which is a large building with a lot of potential. The Parker and Killam schools here in Reading. And then we're looking also at solar canopies and parking lots at those schools. Though the cost is about 1.5 times the cost of rooftop, so the economics are a little more challenging on solar canopies. And the total capacity, we think, potential is about 5 megawatts. And we've got our eyes on about 2.5 megawatts of actual projects where we priced it out and laid it out. And I'll go through some of those.
Question, 2 questions actually. First, solar canopy, can you just explain?
Oh, sure. The solar canopy is in a parking lot when you build a frame.
Park underneath.
Park
Oh,
underneath.
okay. So
Yeah.
for the purposes of only of having the solar
Yeah.
access above.
Yeah, but it also provides some benefits, like it provides shading and snow cover. So, that's typically what you do.
Got it.
You're not heating the asphalt.
Yes,
Yes.
or the car. So
Right.
you need less air conditioning.
And then I know there's a lot of activity happening with the Parker and Killam school project. So how are we engaging with that
So,
group in a formal way?
On Parker, we have a proposal ready, so with the pricing. So what we'll do is we're offering a lease payment to the school in order to rent the roof, and then we'll take all of the output, and they won't have to maintain the system. All they do is get a lease payment from us for using the roof.
And we sat down with the town manager, walked him through, and we're scheduling some time to go to the school and select board.
Okay,
And then we're actively involved on the Killam Building School Committee. So this is on the new school.
got it. Okay.
So a quick question on each type of the rooftop canopy and ground mount solar. To get the credits for, do you have to supply a smart meter? Register the data?
Yes.
Okay, so there's different rates. We set the rates, right?
Yeah.
It's the state, so.
On this particular case, this is big. So these are all these projects that Bill is walking through are in territory RMLD owned generation assets. So,
Okay.
So we'll basically be taking power from them in lieu of taking power from the grid.
So the reason for that, yeah, the reason for that ask is because it gets very, very tricky, because if you have different meters and different sources, there's different rates. You're doing handoffs, and if you're handing something off to the, one canopy, one rooftop, and then one.
Yeah,
There's different rates of for those, but if they're our assets, if they're not our assets,
that's when it gets more complicated.
That's-
That's part of the reason it's our asset. But I think that the other thing is that the metering is very important because there are specific meters that we need to do because we've got to report back
that's correct.
to NEPL in order to claim the credits.
That, yeah, and then on the.
And that's what we really want. Well, it's not, that's not, we need those, the credits being the certificates.
Ownership becomes key then.
Absolutely.
And then on the canopy, crazy question, but it has solid canopy design, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, there's no partitions in the canopies, because partitions in the canopies don't work. It's just, we figured that out, that it doesn't work. Ice comes in and drops on the cars and stuff like that, so.
Mhm.
Yeah, you want a good drainage system.
Yeah, it has to be a solid canopy. It can't be partition.
What about on privately owned building?
Yeah, so like the CNI customer.
Before we get to the private, just to follow up on the questions about the schools. So where does it stand? You've presented to the town manager? or
Town
the select
manager,
board?
town in Reading.
The head of facilities in Wilmington.
Okay, but in terms of Reading.
In terms of
disrespect, but just because I get inquiries sometimes about our town meeting. What is the next step to
we are
move forward with either
We're
part?
going to schedule a meeting with Tom at the school committee, the principal of the school program.
Wise.
And then also we'll have to present in front of the select board.
Okay.
So we're finishing. So we have a plan laid out, dollars, numbers, et cetera. We have a draft agreement.
Okay,
For
for Parker.
Yes. Yeah.
But what about Killam, which is I know just in concept
Killam-
stage right now?
What we've offered is
Yeah.
that we would pay for the solar panel, so they didn't need to include it in the budget.
And again, it would be a lease situation. Like
Yeah, we would pay a
you'd have
lease.
the same business arrangement as
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, we're trying to keep it all the same at $1 per kilowatt hour. We expect to come off of it, so that's everyone's getting the same offer.
Yes, the development of the Killam School is still preliminary. They're going through a variety of steps.
Right.
In that process, there is a sustainability subcommittee
Yep.
to the building committee that's developing the Killam School.
Right.
As a member or outgoing member of the Reading Climate Committee, I have been a part of that sustainability
great.
effort. I will stay a part of that sustainability effort, even though I'll be rolling off the Climate Committee.
Mhm.
But still be a voice for this committee in terms of where that's going.
Okay, great.
They've been looking at various ways of heating and cooling that space. They've got a fossil fuel option just for comparison, but there's a number of different ways that they're talking about using non-carbon
Okay.
or electrical systems. Won't go into that because they're going through that process. They're evaluating options and they'll present that to the sustainability committee and they'll make a recommendation, but that building will be all electric. And therefore having a solar power roof is the way to offset that cost to Reading.
And we are
Separate,
supporting
they
that
would be
effort.
separate systems, like
Well,
the solar would
This,
power the school, the solar would separately create energy that would,
well, I don't know how the wires go, but yes,
Yeah.
Yeah.
this solar panels would be owned by RMLD and they would provide.
So, yeah, so the Killam is still a work in process. Back to your original question. Parker is very clear in terms of, we're gonna basically lease space on the rooftop. We're gonna write them a check on a regular basis. The energy, it's most economical for everybody involved that it flows back into the RMLD network. And the benefit to the school is a regular payment. And it's basically, it's the equivalent of a lease payment. So that's the model that we're going on after. The Parker, like we want to get that project started. Ideally, get it contracted this year, so it gets installed no later than next year.
What does action look like on the town side to make this formal and have it actually happen?
They have to approve the lease.
Okay.
The
for-
staff contract, at least
So that paperwork's in front of the town staff to look at and figure out.
Yeah.
the contract's not the proposal.
Yeah, they have to-
Proposal is, so we've got to take the contract.
Okay.
We have to do a presentation to the school and then to the select board, but we've talked to the town manager already. He said, great, keep it moving forward.
I think a lot of us have the concept that you use solar, use it in that space. What's left over, you get back to the grid. And these larger high canopy environments, if that happens, you get engaged in this very complicated who gets what,
Right.
how do you get paid
Right.
for it? So it's very clean just to say, I do this, you do this.
Really what they're saying.
But exactly how we're setting it up.
So
Now,
Okay.
it becomes a
everybody's
much,
happy.
much cleaner, handout.
Do we have a board liaison to this process or do we need one?
Oh,
Like meeting
Well,
with
Ray-
Ray be, like,
You can, yeah.
I mean, a formal one where like if the school committee has a question, board to board, they go to you or?
I can serve that role. I mean,
and I'm also on
Huh?
the.
Okay, but if I'm talking, I'm just talking about for
I will,
the Reading discussion for.
well, it's not, because it affects every town.
Okay, true.
So we can look at it narrow and say that, but
Yeah,
really every town in the sense of
yes.
the unattractive part of this whole thing.
Yep.
Is when you go to sell it to a town, you say, I'm gonna give you lease space. That check's gonna come in, it's gonna go into the town's general fund. It's not gonna come to me, and it's not going to the school, right? So when you lease space, I don't see a bill, but if I get some of that electricity and I can say, I'm not paying that electric bill $1,000 a month.
Yep.
It actually went to my building opposed to the general fund.
Okay.
So that's my only, and Greg and I've had this conversation, I'm, you in the back. Yeah, so that's,
Thank you. Yeah.
So the way we're gonna approach that, we'll give the option. You send it to the general fund, or we can put it as a bill credit on that particular school building, which addresses your issue.
that's why, like I said, when you're selling it to the stakeholder, the school department or the town select board or whoever, the lease sounds good until, like, if I do a LED project in the building, that refund doesn't come to me to put more LED lights in, that goes into the general fund.
Okay.
So as much as the town still gets it, the stakeholder who's got a budget to manage, it's better when I have
So that's why you want to have the option, and we have the ability to do it, and we can do it cleanly, which is basically a bill
I
credit.
don't think you can. I don't think you can give them a credit. I don't think they get the best of both worlds. You have to decide which way to go. I don't think you can live, I don't think you can, to your point, I know that, yeah, you want the credit electricity to lower your bill. I don't think you're gonna be, if you're the generator and you're leasing, power comes back, that meter spins back to Reading Light. That doesn't.
There is no, so just so we're real clear, the connection does not go through the building's meter. It is
That's
connected to our grid only.
That's right.
And it is metered, but it
It's
has not, so it just happens to sit on top of that building.
Right.
And the mechanism is, and we have the mechanism to do it, and we can track it, but whatever that lease, so independent of what it generates, we've committed to X dollars a year
on a lease.
on a lease.
Yeah.
And the way we'll pay that lease is in the form of a credit on the monthly bill to that building. Now, it depends
Like-
on every
and that's the key.
every town has a little bit different structure in terms of what building. This is exactly what we ended up doing with
You agree
Linfield.
with that, right?
Lot.
That's the way to
Again,
do it.
When you're trying to sell it to somebody and I have a budget and I'm gonna support it more when I know
Get it to your budget.
my $2 million electric bill or whatever for the year, I'm getting a percentage back so I can show a savings, and when I budget, I can,
You're getting at least eight.
yeah, so, but when the other way, again, the town still benefits, but if it goes into the general fund, without a decision at town meeting, I can't take any of that money and spend it.
And Bob, back to your point, it won't be a mix of the two. It'll be A or B. But if they want a lease payment to the town, fine. If they want a credit on the bill, fine. We can do either one, but not a mix. Back to your point.
But the credit on the bill would be that would be the lease payment.
Correct.
It's not, you're not giving them the power.
Correct.
Correct. You're just, this is how you pay the lease
It is
payment.
purely,
Yeah.
it is a payment mechanism only, but and every town's a little bit different. Every building's a little bit different. So that's why we're trying to, the point that Dennis has brought up is a point that we've heard.
Yep.
And we're trying to make sure that to the best of our ability, we can accommodate that. Because again, you guys know intimately well, towns have all sorts of different departments and all sorts of different budgets. So get it as close to the benefit, to the place where the value is being created for us, get it as close to them as possible. And the current plan, we might come across some other crazy thing, but the current plan, we can send it to the general fund, but we'll probably end up doing more of it to apply to that particular building as a lease payment only, not tied to the energy.
And when you're selling to a school department, you can say, geez, you can tie a science educational plan around the solar that's on the roof. That's a great selling point to a school, but financial people don't get the benefit of it. And that's why the money's got to go back towards something that takes it off the bill or, and
Right. Yeah. So we're going to, again, every installation is going to be a little bit unique, and we're trying to make it, we're trying to be as accommodating as we can for the point that Dennis brought up.
The reason I started on this path of discussing this is because I watched over a period of years where the topic of putting solar on municipal buildings went on and on and on and on and on and on. And you go away from the meeting and everybody had a different understanding of what got said and how it was going to work and who was supposed to do what next. And that's the whole reason I'm bringing it up at this meeting. So that I think,
No, that's fair.
I think it would be useful. And maybe if we need a board liaison, one of you, maybe it's Ray, because he's already doing it, is like, just make sure, does everybody understand all of this? Anything we need to clear up? It would just, we want to just help facilitate.
Yeah, we're here to help.
I know.
It
And
would
I
be a
think
big
the-
missed opportunity if we have these big projects and we don't.
I think the other important point, because we've looked at these for many years, and the big difference right now is that as RMLD, we now have access to the ITC, the investment tax credit. So that makes it more economically viable for us to be able to do it in a way. And the subcommittees, we've looked at some of the numbers, so it's actually advantageous. What you're seeing, what Bill's walking through here is, we're trying to do in-territory generation, and this, the first block in the in-territory generation is solar PV in territory. So we're basically saying, here's all the projects we're doing. We're gonna Bill will get to the bottom. Here's the maximum we're gonna do, and this is not just this is the plan. This is what we're doing, and then we'll talk about other options in the next.
And not to get off topic, with the thinking of solar on roofs, in the 11 years I've been with the town, there's been 2 winters where we had to worry about snow load. And now and I can go up and shovel it easier without solar panels. Once you add those, and I'm dealing with older schools, start talking snow loads, how am I getting it off the solar panel safely, then off the roof safely and efficiently? And that would be a topic that each town would have to talk about, because that's going to be a concern.
Bill will get into it, but it's gonna dramatically. There are a lot of buildings where they just snow or no snow won't be able to take the load.
Yeah.
So Bill walking through all the opportunity again, big picture. Let them get through the end, but we're gonna add. What do we end up 30 megawatts?
Yeah, it's gonna be between 30 and 40.
So somewhere between 30 and 40 incremental megawatts. And, we don't know how it's we look at each individual. So we are aggressively trying to put this in place. And we just want to let you guys know, hear all the things that are going on. Point well taken, so that we have a board person that here's how it works. Bob's point, simple model. Just keep it simple.
And you can't, like you said, you can't always get on the roof. There's so many mini splits on every roof now.
Yeah.
It canopy is
It's limited.
it's very limited. You might get 2 solar panels on a roof. It's not even economical to do it because of the amount of stuff on the roof.
That was exactly gonna be my question, is at what point does it make sense to do that? Because I just think about, you've got your commercial industrial, but what about large residences? How big does it need to be to make it worthwhile?
And right now we're still providing the incentive for customers in residential to,
Do it yourself.
to
For them, don't, yes.
because we don't want to be in the position where we're maintaining a lot of residential roofs.
Ah.
Whereas if we limit it to larger commercial and industrial roofs, then there's a little less risk.
And when you look at the newest schools, all the technology is going on the roof. You do have the mansards, which are the metal that blocks everything. But that's only so much space to put solar. You'd never get enough power on it to make it worthwhile. But if I look at the high school, every 20 feet, 25 feet, I have an air handler.
Yeah.
Then they put a courtyard in the middle, so then that's all taken. So you start looking at all the spaces on a new school, it's a lot more difficult to fit.
Yeah, I think you're gonna end up in the bottom line. We'll do as much as we can.
Do
It's
any
not gonna be a lot.
municipal, do any municipal or school buildings in our four towns have solar on it now?
Say again.
Do any municipal or school buildings in our four towns have solar on their roofs now?
Not that I know.
Only if they went through a Reading Light, because the power purchase agreement prevents us from, unless we outright buy it. The power purchase agreement prevents us from getting a power purchase agreement with solar. So that's been Wilmington's thing for years. And then we keep talking about the older schools. We have a lot of schools 60, 70 years old. You want them from up there for 15 to 20 years. I don't know if I can commit to 15 years because we'd like to build new schools. So it get, and again, Greg and I have had a lot of conversations. It just starts becoming questionable of where it fits.
Yeah.
So I think all four towns probably have a lot of similar aged schools. So if you're going to build a school and not tear down the other two, consolidate, not tear down other schools, you may have that roof space and use that building for something else, but you've got to determine that it fits both sides of the coin.
And bottom, I mean, at the end of, so we'll let Bill finish his slides.
Yeah, sorry.
No.
Pretty optimistic about that.
Exciting. You won.
Bottom line, we'll maximize it, but it's not big. Just, I mean, for all these reasons, it's complicated, it's not easy, that's why we haven't done a lot of them. We'll do everything we can, but it's an important brick, it's an important block.
What is the potential? If you were to be
For
able,
municipal,
for municipal
I
buildings,
think
how,
5 megawatts,
based on
based on our
how much
analysis.
adoption you think you could get, or if you did all of them?
Well, we can't do all of them, but some of them just aren't. They have very like
Yeah,
like here the
All the issues
Parker.
that Dennis mentioned.
This is the Parker School in the photo, so that's very good because it's very flat and open. All of the panels are going to get a similar sort of piece of the sun. But some schools are, they have its roofs and all sorts of angles, so it's difficult to.
It really comes down to the school was built in the 60s, 70s, and early 80s. You probably have a ton of open roof space. It was really the 80s and on that more and more equipment and air handlers were going to the roofs.
You got a roof space, but not structural strength. I mean, so anyways,
Carry on.
No, it's good feedback. It's good that you care. So the third category is C&I customer. So we have a lot of large rooftops, right? And most of them are in Wilmington and North Reading because those are where the big ones are. There are roof suitability issues, and I'll go into detail on some of that in a minute. But it does utilize underutilized roofs, and we think there's the potential for 10 to 20 megawatts in those areas. Okay, so the suitability of the rooftops. First is the condition of the rooftops. A lot of our buildings are older, right? And they haven't had a roof redone in 10 to 15 years. And they have to sustain around 20 pounds per square foot in order to be safe for the lifetime of the solar panels. So like Dennis said, you don't want to, if you've got an old building and you think you're going to do the roof over, you don't want to put solar on there until you redo the roof, because you don't want to take off of the solar panels to do the roof over. And we did reach out to a regional roofing company, and if you wanted to upgrade a roof as part of installing the solar project, it would cost you about $35 to $40 per square foot. So it's not really doable unless you really need a roof. And that's what we found on Burbank Ice Arena. I think it's that the roof as designed was not suitable for the 20 pounds per square foot. Um, so the most companies have done repairs on the rooftops, and if they've done patchwork, it can putting the solar panels on can cause damage to the repairs that were done. And then with the current costs of installing solar and our relatively low rates, it is difficult for commercial customers to see a payback worth investing in for them. And of course, they're not seeing the forward price curve, so they don't typically take into account what's going to happen when we go fully non-carbon. So if we can invest now, right ahead of that rise in prices, we'll be able to at least get the benefits of the non-carbon solar energy before it's really driving up the costs overall. And we really don't know what that will be. We did do detailed analyses. This is just we use a program called Helioscope, and we can look at each roof and estimate the monthly generation from each project. I won't go into detail on that. This is an example of a customer in Wilmington. You can see all the blue things are solar panels. The pink areas are solar canopies in the parking lot. So we've done that level of analysis on a number of these industrial customers and some of the municipal customers. This is another just solar canopy. This is another industrial customer. You can see we do have to go around all the things that are on the roof, all the air handling equipment. And this is in Wilmington. This is an example. The Shawsheen Elementary School. It's a relatively small system. It's 100 kilowatts. The price, it will generate power at $92 a megawatt hour, which is higher than our standard and our base cost. But the benefit is we don't have to import it into the territory, so we do offset a little bit of transmission and capacity costs. Unfortunately, solar drops off in the evening. That's one of the reasons we have the peak, is because the solar stopped generating. But it does. We have calculated and currently solar eliminates about 10 to 11% of the transmission and capacity costs. There is some benefit in that area. This is the solar canopy for the Shawsheen, and as you can see in the dollar per megawatt hour, it's significantly higher at $129 per megawatt hour. So we really have to think about how many solar canopies we would want to put in. And here's Parker Middle School. So that where we've laid out all the areas that are good. I believe that the flat areas without panels were older roofs. I think you can see some of the patches on there. So that is an opportunity if someday they do those areas of roof over, we could add additional panels. This system cost is about $104 per megawatt. So in summary, that's again the Parker School. We're actively pursuing these development opportunities. The ground mount has the best economies, but the large acreage we need for scale is also difficult to get. So that's the boundary on doing 175 megawatts of solar. And there are many large rooftops in our area, but of course we have to get buy-in from the customer, and we have to make sure the roof is suitable for it. But we'll continue those conversations with those customers about that. And then our ownership and the IRA tax credits do help offset what we think are kind of marginal economics. But it will create a hedge, we think, in the future against power prices going above these levels, because once we have it installed, there's no fuel cost, right? So it will be a relatively flat rate. This is paying off the capital. And as long as the roof doesn't collapse, there will be no additional costs, right? So that's
what percent of commercial industrial roofs have solar that are
we only have
portable?
about 8%. No, not 8%.
Projects.
Eight projects that have been large enough. We've got a customer in Wilmington currently putting in We have Camp Curtis put in some solar. And then we had some other customers that, a solar developer comes along and wants to use their roof. But again, the economics have not been great for that. So there haven't been a lot of them. That's why we think if we go and say we will kind of de-risk this for you, and we will pay you a certain lease payment. So at least you're getting that benefit, and you're also helping us to keep rates down by locking into this lower price now, taking advantage of the limited time investment tax credits. Because even they, I think they find they can't justify the investment even with the tax credits because it's above their hurdle rate.
So the method of getting to try to get these built is RMLD staff approaching the owners.
Yeah, we have been working with a developer. So we have been bringing them to help develop it. And of course, they're sales oriented, so they help bring the the experience and a list of projects that they've done. So we're working with them to do that, and they do have a contract with the state through power auctions, so we don't need to bid it out and still be in compliance with the return laws.
Solar choice, how is this factoring in? How is that being implemented? Or
so this will create more opportunity. So it will create more supply of RECs that can be bought by the people who want to participate in renewable choice. So there are these class 1 RECs, which, I guess we'll decide on a ongoing basis whether we sell them or retire them. And then there's always that choice of promoting it to customers. And I think, having the publicity around these projects is we can use it as an opportunity to say
that we need to think that through. I don't think that's a full enough, complete enough answer. We're asking the community to go to heat pumps. Their electric bill is going to go up. Get it? The fuel's going to go down. I know. I have the data.
Yeah.
So there is an incentive there.
Yep.
But their bill's going to go up. If they put solar on their roof, then they can offset that electrical cost.
Mm-hmm.
To anyone with an optimal roof, you're going to say, great, we'll net meter your house. You're not going to get much payback, but at least your bill will be close to zero.
Yeah.
For the houses, and that's going to be the majority of them, we're still going to want them to put heat pumps in. We're going to say, well, and you could put solar on your roof, and they're going to say, no, I can't. I don't have the right orientation. I don't have the right structure. Trees. They didn't plan for solar roofs when they built my 1632 house. Wasn't in the design. So you're going to say, well, maybe we'll get some tax credits down the road, and maybe you can kind of participate. That can't be the only answer. When we do the fields and we're building the solar panels in
Maple Meadows.
wherever, yeah. Not all your projects are going to qualify that, but the big ones where you have some value that you can return back. Open that up for customers to buy a panel, buy a unit of energy, and participate in that effort in saying, okay, great. I can't put solar on your house, but I can put solar over in this field over here, and we'll give you a benefit for that.
Yeah.
And then that doesn't rule out when we get to RECs and we want to have people invest in the what's that
I
program?
think that's kind of the same thing.
That's renewable
That's
choice.
what you're saying.
Renewable choice.
Yeah, renewable choice.
It's not the same thing.
Yeah, there's two different programs, renewable choice and solar choice. And what Ray's bringing up right now, is a third option, which is allow somebody to, if they can invest to put solar on their own roof, we'll give them an opportunity to invest and put solar somewhere else. And the idea, let's take Maple Meadows, for example, is, so it's 10 megawatts, and RMLD will own 9 of those megawatts and leave the last megawatt open with the frames and the racks and the inverters, and offer for those that want to buy 1 panel, 2 panel, 3 panels. We obviously have to keep track of it, which we can do, but they would actually own a panel in a frame that we manage and maintain. I'm just telling you, I hear you, Bob, but Yeah, it's so
It's done.
back to the concept of simplicity.
And it's not a new concept. We
No,
did
it's
it.
not. No, it's not.
We've done 2 projects this way already.
Yeah.
So I'm not advocating something we haven't done already.
I
Agreed.
guess that's why I thought it was the same thing, because it sounds like something
Well,
we've done.
Solar choices is something we've done, and renewable
place.
choice,
So-
I think,
So choice is in place.
is still a third option. You're a renter or you're a condo owner, and that's you don't have any control over your heating or cooling, and yet you still want to be able to know that
You're doing something.
energy you're paying is going into something. That's where renewable choice comes in. But we need to strengthen the incentives to get more people onto heat pumps, and being able to say that, we've strengthened the incentives to put solar that you purchase on your house and give you value and credit for that. Let's hear about what we're offering and what other people are offering. I realize we're not doing a raw straight net metering. I get it, but we can
Yeah.
probably do way better than we are. And if you
That's
can,
almost-
then let's do a solar choice option. If we're going to put these in fields at a good rate, let's invest in having people contribute to that, because you're right. There are going to be some places in parking lots which aren't really cost effective.
Mm.
Let's get some investment somewhere else where across the board, we bring the peaks and the valleys of the cost.
I think
That's
the
something
takeaway
that
from
meets our
today
target.
is, let's make options for a broader set of individuals in our territory to participate in some way, shape, or form. So that'll be our takeaway.
Well-
You know, I've talked about that a little bit.
It's interesting, but why should we be the solar fidelity? Right? That's not,
What?
why should we be the solar fidelity? Right? Why should we be the one to broker this? People have a opportunity. I understand that you can't get it on your house. A lot of us can't because the trees or terrain or
Okay,
whatever.
Okay, thank
You
you.
know, I like the concept, but now we're getting into a financial system that we're RMLD, right? Transaction,
We
you
do
buy
have to be,
electricity.
we have to be very
We get- we
careful
get-
and consistent because we have to treat all customers fair.
No,
But I think
no,
what Ray's saying, think creatively in terms of how to do this. And your caution.
No,
Well,
it's a unique concept, but I just, there's two sides of it. Why should we get engaged in that?
Because we need land. And land is on people's houses.
It's people's houses.
And
It's not.
to encourage, correct.
Yeah, so,
And that's where the power is
go ahead,
generated.
Rebecca.
Yeah, Vivek,
no, so thanks, Ray, I think I really like your idea. And Bob, I think what we have to think about is what Ray is saying is you want to give people motivation to adopt heat pumps, right?
Correct.
So what you're really looking to do is how do you incent behavior? And you have to think about how are you going to make this work if they can't put solar? So if you're going to give them an option to get a piece of the action, you're essentially opening it up to everyone. Greg, you can't block others, right? So if you're going to make this available for one set of customers, you make it available for everyone. And then the ownership piece that RMLD has can be a variable ownership. So you have an asset that initially RMLD owns 100% of it, but then at different stages, you could have people owning different amounts. And you can set this up on, like, Greg is going to be building his analytics team. There'll be some people who'll be working on models like this. So the question is, how do I build a capability where at one time I can maybe own 100% of it, but then if I'm getting other people, I can let them own part of it and then helping them, have the incentive to adopt heat pumps.
Yeah, and just,
I think it's a really great idea, Ray.
so we need, I think what you and Ray and Bob, your prompt to say, think out of the box and, and we'll bring back ideas. But I want to make one thing real clear is, we look at solar as a generation asset, right? And heat pumps, we have different programs that we're putting in place relative to accelerate the adoption of air source heat pumps. So that there's incentives and loans and linkages to weatherization programs. We'll walk you through over the next few sessions how we're going to modify those. But
And you have to match, it's not the capacity, you have to match the energy load.
yeah, but I our intention is not to link solar with heat pumps, right? There's a generation opportunity, and those are for people that want to be more non-carbon, and we'll have a couple different mechanisms. And then there's the air source heat pump program. You can participate in both if you want, but we don't see a need to link those two. People can decide to do one or the other or both, mix and match to the extent. I want to be very careful. I don't tie them together. We'll give them the option to do both.
Well,
but I'm not going to force them to do both.
Well,
Yeah, no, it's a good idea not to link it, but you give people, to Ray's point, you give people an opportunity
Totally
to,
fine. I want to make sure we're on the same page. So good. Now that you're playing that back, I'm
Yeah.
yeah, well, if you're not gonna own the solar panels on a person's house, then the person who is correct, fine, agreed.
Yeah.
Then the person who owns the house is linking it. Very much,
fine.
you know, so that all we're simply saying is that the incentive we give them to generate the power that supports their heat pump is one program,
Totally fine.
and then
For
for the
their,
person
them
that
and their
can't,
bill,
we give
it's
them,
all tied together.
right.
Right. But so no problem with that.
Keep it up. We're forming another committee.
Question is, now we're talking about owning solar panels on people's houses.
No.
Oh, I was gonna say, now we're talking about.
We're gonna own the
liability
house.
thing.
We're actually gonna own the entire house.
No, we're not. Yeah,
No.
Okay, I was just gonna say,
I'm
we're
not,
talking about a whole new liability issue.
no, yeah, no, I'm not talking.
We're asking for an amendment to the MBTA communities law to require 8 units of solar panels on every single family house.
My building's in that district.
Yeah, mine is too.
onward.
Yes, onward. Good discussion.
Building. Wow.
Bill, look where you started.
Bill.
We on slide 3 now?
We haven't figured out how to get solar power in the
Which is good.
He told me we're gonna be done.
we had a more efficient chair, maybe we would.
Next.
Okay, next agenda item.
I don't
Yeah.
have these slides, but we've just met once since our last meeting. And talked primarily about some of the communication strategies around the next section or next topic, which is the in-territory generation with the carbon capture fuel cell. We didn't come to any kind of final conclusion, but I know you guys are going to talk a little bit about some of the messaging in the next set of slides.
Yeah, I'll talk a little about it. I think so. One of the things so you'll see some of it in the next few slides, some of the things we talked about. So when you finish.
Okay, so yeah, so we talked about the populations that we need to communicate some of the kind of broad messages. And some of the kind of the timing and kind of the decision makers versus informed, just kind of awareness, and kind of the different modes of communication for that. So it's a little bit more of an exploratory conversation, getting feedback from the committee, which you guys took back. And then we just got a quick update on the procurement milestones.
Yeah,
So
we'll bring everybody up to speed.
yeah, so that was the extent of our most recent session. I do think, some of the prior conversations have helped once we get through this carbon capture fuel cell process, if we're going to proceed with that. I think the committee may actually be a great way for us to dig into some of these other options on the solar as our next topic. So I know we're going to continue the meetings to focus on carbon capture fuel cell, but definitely see lots of additional topics to keep that committee focused on. Anybody else on the committee want to add anything? No.
yeah, we may have to redefine the scope, right? That's all.
At that time, yeah. Erica, if you could switch to the slide, I'll go through them. I'm not going to walk through every slide. Great, good. The reason I put some of these slides up front, the mission, if somebody's looking at these after the fact, they understand the context. Executive summary, you guys know this, I'm not going to walk you through that. This is just a reminder, right? What are we trying to do? We're looking at load growth in our territory. We continually look at that on a regular basis. It's roughly 2x by 2050. As you can see, we become in this chart on the far right-hand side. Each one of those 4 blocks, there's 2023 in the left, the middle is 2038, and the right's 2050. But you can see on the left hand, 2023, we are what is known as a summer peaking territory, or our territory is, which is consistent with the region. As you move to the far right, 2050, we become a winter peaking. And the reason for that is that light blue is air source heat pumps. We've got a bunch of assumptions in terms of the adoption rate, et cetera. But the air source heat pumps are used for heating and cooling. But our assumption is that air source heat pumps will replace existing or small incremental addition of central air or window air conditioning. So there's a small little blue in the summer months, but the big change is in the winter months, air source heat pumps replacing either natural gas or oil, which is the predominant way of heating. The dark blue right below it is EVs, and those two are just the residential side. And you can see the EVs, and again, there's assumptions tied to EV adoptions, et cetera. We're trying to be realistic in terms of where it looks like, but that's the driver. That's what we're trying to fill. This is just, again, big picture, right? What we're looking at is how do we, in this chart, that cross-hatched area is the energy that we have not yet contracted for. All the solid blocks below it are contracts in place. Our intention is to continue working on the hydro, for example. You can see that it tapers down. Our intention is to keep it at roughly 20%. So we will continue to look at as opportunities come up to continue, over the long term, having that hydro be in roughly a 20% range. We are aggressively looking at that. We've got contracts. You can see our solar and wind. And when you get to 25, 26, becomes big. These are contracts that we did last year and the year before, where they start coming online. We're going to continue looking for those as well. But in that crosshatch area, we have three core options to fill that portfolio. One is to purchase on the open market in either real-time, RT is real-time, or day ahead. We prefer to buy in day ahead. It tends to be a little bit less expensive than real-time. The second element is to contract more long-term supply contracts, which are the solid bars in that chart. Or the third element is generate in territory. And so we're trying to do a mix. So just a reminder, right? If we do nothing, open market is the default plan. Some of the things that we think about for the different technologies, just a quick review, is capacity factor. So in a nutshell, wind, solar, hydro, and nuclear, and the CCFC is the carbon capture fuel cell. You can see the capacity factor is very different. Solar is roughly 17%. And while it might be a 20 mega, these are all, just to give you an example, 20 megawatt systems. If you go across the solar line at a 70% capacity factor, it'll generate roughly 30,000 megawatt hours a year. We sell kilowatt hours. So while the capacity is 20 megawatts or whatever, that's great, but it's got to deliver over time. You look at nuclear, for example, which is 98% in our territory. So that 20 megawatts is equivalent to 170,000 megawatt hours. So when we look at all these different options, capacity factor is a key piece of it. As we had talked about before, in territory generation is the third option, right? We will always buy open market, some percentage of it. We will always do long-term supply contracts. The new strategy that we're putting in place right now is in territory generation. And we'll talk about the logic behind it, but it's primarily for financial reasons and reliability reasons. If we look at what we can do in territory, all of these are part of our portfolio, right? We have wind onshore as well as offshore, but it doesn't fit in our territory. There'll be no wind towers in our territory. We don't have any dams or any hydro in our territory right now, and none will be built. So while we like it, there's not an opportunity for us here. Small modular nuclear reactor, that's the upper right-hand corner. There's probably a place for that in the region, but not inside of our territory. And as we talked about offline earlier before our meeting, hydrogen it's still down the road. So we want to be open to it at some point in time, but there's nothing for us to buy in the near term. The other options for in territory is solar PV, and Bill walked us through. Our first step is to maximize as much solar PV as we possibly can, and that's what we're doing. So additional 40 megawatts is our rough target, which we think we can add to the territory, and Bill gave us a bunch of examples. At the bottom row there, 2034 is that low temperature geothermal. The interesting thing about low temperature geothermal, it doesn't take a lot of land space, right? It's basically going down. It's a similar concept to using geothermal. It's a heat pump concept. It's more than a concept. There are systems running today, but it's not yet commercially viable. It might be commercially viable in the mid 2030s. As that comes commercially viable, that's a great solution for not just our territory, but the entire region. There's not a lot of open space. The short-term scenario then that we're looking at is the carbon capture fuel cell. Because it's available now, we're basically positioning it as a bridge technology. So just big picture, and this goes into some of the discussions that we had earlier this week at our subcommittee group. Is, I think the phrase is responsible diversification in terms of our power supply portfolio. So the idea across here is if you look at 2010 through 2050, solar is a base level piece, right? We have roughly 10 megawatts in territory right now. That's that first row, and it'll continue. Those systems will probably continue running through almost 2050. We're going to add somewhere, that next block is add another 30, maybe 40 megawatts of the different projects that Bill walked us through. Layer on top of that, carbon capture fuel cell. Again, it will probably run just for 15 years. We'll set, as we talked about before in this group, we'll leave the options to allow us to extend it if we decide to. But from an economic perspective, it will have basically been fully paid for, fully utilized, and have some residual value by the time we get to early 2040s. And then the other two blocks that we talked about before, low temperature geothermal, it would start somewhere in the mid 2030s. Again, a lot of assumptions in terms of when that technology is commercially viable. Probably another 20 megawatts. There might be 25 megawatts depending upon load. And then maybe in that time frame, hydrogen, maybe in 2040s. But the point being is we're looking at layering assets, in territory assets, in a way that basically supports our mission of reliable, low cost, non-carbon, and fits the compliance timeline as well. So that's how we're thinking about it. So that's kind of big picture. And this slide came out of the discussion we had earlier this week in terms of how to think about it. We'll work on the graphic, et cetera, but this is how something along these lines is what we want to put into our broader communication package so people can get an idea of how we're thinking about layering technologies on top of each other. Good.
Low temperature geothermal, kind of couch it as it's not quite developed yet multiple universities have used it for their on-campus structures, in which they have a ground loop which provides a heat and cooling loop for multiple buildings. And there was recently approved a residential ground loop, and I'm not going to get the right town, Framingham. Is the first residential style loop. I don't see that. Maybe your question is that's not generation, really.
Yeah. So those systems, as you know, are well established and they work great. We're covering 51 square miles, and
so it would be project based that you would do it. In other words, like you're putting in a development or you're putting in.
No, actually, so the individual developer would make the decision at that point. Great example, right? Ken and I earlier this year, anyways, there's a 51 unit complex that they've had interest in terms of putting in. They wanted to put fossil fuels.
That's the Toll Brothers development.
Toll Brothers, yeah. So they're they're looking at the option of doing geothermal heat pumps. Well, either geothermal heat pumps or air source heat pumps. So that's a decision that they would make on their behalf, but it's purely to generate heat. When we look at low temperature geothermal, this would be used to generate electricity.
Right. So I realize, yes. I understand.
I know you get it, Ray, but people are going to look at this video later on. That low temperature geothermal is an electricity generation.
Right.
Facility.
And so say there's a development or some sort of zoning or review of something like maybe in the Walkersbrook area, just for example, like hypothetically.
Yeah.
There's a number of office buildings, there's a number of commercial buildings, all of which demand heat. If they all individually convert to heat pumps, that's a huge energy demand. But if we can do a ground loop, we can manage that and bring that to efficiency. So it isn't a generation for us necessarily, but it's a demand management option.
So on that note, that's a good prompt, Ray. One of the things that we're thinking about, what are we in the business of providing, right? We're in the business of providing heat, light, transportation, refrigeration, cooking. We all do it through electricity. So there is a scenario, and we've touched on this and we've done some initial exploration. But because we actually like assets, our business is economically friendly to assets. Other businesses aren't. Maybe there's a scenario where we actually own that loop. So it might cover 4 or 5 buildings. In fact, it could potentially be what we end up coming up for this campus. So I think your point's well taken, and we're actually, I won't say actively looking because it's a little bit further down the road, but that concept of, hey, let's think about us being in a slightly different business. It still is energy, still electricity, but what gets delivered might be heat and cooling. So good prompt. This one, though, the idea of this one, remember, it's a graphic that we actually used, and I thought it was well received at the Linfield water department meeting. But we basically had our map laid out, and we had our different tie points and our different potential generation of asset, and you could look at it basically being a ring all the way around. So the idea is it's a core concept of distributed energy resources. In this case, distributed energy generation. And so between the solar arrays and carbon capture, fuel cell, low temperature geo, whatever they work out to be, it's basically in the ring. So if we have a problem in one location, and this weekend we had two squirrels, one in Linfield.
I got the whole town.
Yeah, that hit the primary. So we want to work we're working diligently to make us more wildlife resistant and tree resistant, but it's never going to be perfect unless you put them all in the bed. But I won't get into that. So anyways,
Tree truck went down Franklin Street last week, so I got an up close view of
You got
tree
it,
trimming
right.
activity.
So we're trying to, again, it always takes us back. What's our mission, right? Reliable, low cost, non-carbon energy, right? So that's what we keep trying to do over and over again. And these are all mechanisms in a world that's changing pretty quickly. All right. So the last two pieces. So this is the big picture, in terms of, 2024 through 2020 on the right-hand side, is 2026. That green, basically, we have confirmed the procurement process as our meeting that we had on the 5th, 10 days ago, 2 weeks ago. We walked through that process. I'll walk through a little bit more detail in terms of the carbon capture piece, because there are approval steps for you guys to approve as we go through that process. But we're still, looking at making sure that if we decide to go forward, we've given ourselves the ability to hit the ITC safe harbor deadline. So that still is important. There's a lot of work to be done. As we dig a little bit deeper into the specific procurement piece, what we did 2 weeks ago was engaging the owner's engineer. The bid package was actually prepared. It went out. There's actually a lot of interest we're getting a lot of responses back. They're due back. Well, we have questions coming in, but they're due back before the July 4th holiday. So in the July meeting, we will come to you and say we want to hire, whatever. We'll have to look at all the different proposals, but that'll be a specific approval to actually start spending money for real on the project. Hopefully we'll be able to have gotten through most of the questions we have with our subcommittee. We still have some work. We have a couple action items on natural gas. We have a couple action items on several pieces. And even if we do that, we still need to go through about 6 lines down, submit to the Inspector General. We'll need to secure approval for them and then issue the bid package. And then there's going to be an evaluation in September, another approval cycle for you guys to go forward to the next step. And even when we get to that point in time, there'll be some additional off ramps. So there's a bunch of approval stages that we're going to present the board with in terms of moving forward. So it's kind of I'm giving a kind of a quick summary of where we are in the process. And you can't quite see it in this chart, but we're in mid-June, well, almost late June. Questions on?
I have one question. If you can go back a few slides to where it shows the different types that are making up our total load. Yeah, this one. So between 2026 and 2030, it looks like we're fully subscribed. Is that where we want to be? Are we being conservative and thinking that load requirement may be a little higher? It looks like we don't have any.
We'll be 95% hedged.
Is
It's higher than we'd like to be.
going forward?
Because it will give us price certainty. So we know where we'll be. The downside is the prices drop significantly, then be out of the money, but we'll still know so rates won't go up. They'll just stay where they are.
In the more volatile market that we're in right now, we want to be somewhere north of 90% hedged. 4 years ago, 3 years ago, mid 2015, prices were very stable. And so being 60-70% hedged was fine because there wasn't a lot of ups and downs. Some of the other presentations that we shared with you guys is we've moved that target up. We've done it steadily over the past 3 years, 75%, 80%, 85%, 90. So in reality, 27, 28, it's probably, I'd rather it be 5% less. But we're basically trying to hit that ICT target. So we're not creating a problem for ourselves. We're going to continue tracking this chart. Some of those contracted projects particularly in the yellow won't get built. So that's another element, which even though they're contracted,
So this is assuming everything that we have planned, it stays on schedule, which
is not happening.
they won't happen. So
So we've been through the past 3 years, and we have another project right now. The developer said, "Look, I can't make it work unless you guys want to be in the triple-digit numbers for solar," and we don't, because it's so there's a challenge. So your question is really good and very appropriate. We manage, like when I say we manage this, like we look at this all the time. And as Bill mentioned, our intention is to make sure that we don't have any price bills that just are incredibly high for our customers. There'll be times when, hey, if we weren't so hedged, we might have been a little bit lower. But our goal is to prevent against the expensive side. And sometimes, we won't, we won't be in the money. It's, this is, as we talked about the last presentation, power supply goes risk. It's a risk managing game. It's type of energy, geographic location, who's the supplier, the nature of the contract. There's a whole bunch of factors we look at. And so we fortunately are in a very good position because we've got a very diversified portfolio. And that's why when we keyed off of our Monday discussion, the responsible verification kind of fits into what we're doing already.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, we're gonna jump to policy review. Right. I don't know, at least I think.
Oh, yeah.
Greg's had a couple snacks.
We smoking Paul Malls out in the parking lot? We smoking Paul Malls out in the parking lot?
Not this parking lot, across the street though. So again, we have a procedure of reviewing our policies every 3 years. Smoking happens to be its time has come up to be reviewed. You got a chance to take a look at it, but I think at the end of the day, the key pieces we streamline, as we're trying to do with all of them. You guys remember in policy 19, we moved all the board responsibilities into policy 19. We did that, I think 2 sessions ago, maybe 3 sessions ago now. So we're cleaning that up. In this particular case, we are a smoke-free environment, but we basically, the main change we did besides cleaning it up was have it tied to the state regulations. So we're not trying to create any special regulations ourselves. We're just trying to be consistent with what the state does. So as the state modifies, our policy will modify with it. There's nothing, we don't have a smoking problem here. So it's, we can dig deeper into it, but this is not this is a pretty straightforward policy change. Any questions?
Ask a question.
Yeah.
Just curious. Do you have to run this through the union where it's a smoking thing and includes cars? When you make a change like this, do you have to get any type of input from them? Okay.
Just because we don't, until these are board policies.
Yeah.
Right? These are your policies, right? The second element is we're basically being consistent with the state law. So even if there was a problem, the problem's not with us.
I just didn't know if there had to be any type of buy-in at any point for that.
Any questions?
Is there a smoking area?
There's not. There was. No, there's not. Wow.
Was there?
At one point in time, there was, before my time.
Because, some people still do smoke. I mean, it's still
Yep.
up there, part of it. I mean, if there's a designated smoking area, then
We are legitimately a smoke-free environment.
I just don't want that to create.
Yeah, I agree.
That's not something new in this policy. It has been that way. I guess
We
that's what we're saying.
are smoke-free. We don't have people that smoke in the building. Or outside the building for that matter, or in the vehicles. Any other questions? This was pretty simple.
Ready to vote?
Yeah, I'm fine. I just see we're sort of moving away from smoking to smoking, vaping and well, spitting, but it's, the chewing.
Well, spitting is, not to get too technical,
Yeah, it's the,
chew all you want, but
yeah.
Yeah.
You're not swallowing, I get it.
we
But
are
I can
literally,
see-
we are literally queuing off of the state regs.
Yeah, no, yeah, I get it. And we just think of it smoking, but you've sort of expanded the definition, but you've also very clear in terms of limiting where that's acceptable. So
And smoking of other substances other than tobacco is covered into the drug. policy.
Correct. Well, we'll be talking about that in probably August.
Question, you don't test your employees for nicotine, do you?
We do drug testing. I don't know if tobacco's in the, I don't, I can find out. I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay.
We don't, yeah.
Ready for a vote?
Does anybody read the motion?
Who's gonna read the motion?
I could do that. Is it just, there's no cab here? So that's okay. Move that the RMLD Board of Commissioners approve policy 4, smoking revision 8 as presented on the recommendation of the general manager.
Second.
Okay, any more discussion? All in favor? Okay, motion carries 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. General manager update, since we did one 2 weeks ago, there's a lot of stuff in the next couple of weeks I will send you an update on, we'll talk about in July. But this one, I wanted to use this time, I'm responding back to your prompt. There's a lot of stuff here. So the real message behind this is, as we've talked about over the past several months, and we talked about it again today, right? It was part of the discussion in terms of, how do we accelerate the adoption of air? How do we change the incentive structure to encourage weatherization, air source heat pumps, solar, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a bit of context here in terms of what are we trying to have the incentives do. And what we looked at is, so we have programs in place that are focused on peak hours. And peak hours, so we're sharing with you ideas and thoughts. This is meant to be discussion. There's more work that we need to do. But the question is, how do we really optimize our distribution network? I actually had a call, Ben and I had a call with the S&P rating agency today. We do it every 2 years. I didn't get to the slide of this detail, but if you look at our cost structure, our system, because it's electricity, is designed to handle peak loads. And we have a fixed capital investment to handle those peak loads. And that fixed capital investment includes poles and wires and transformers and switchgear and substations. It includes the employees and, the buildings, et cetera. Right now, our capacity is in the 230 megawatt range. And our peak load is in the 160 range. So we're roughly in terms of peak capacity, we're roughly in the 70% of peak range. In terms of looking at megawatt hours or our utilization of our capacity over all the hours in the year, which is 8760, we are in the mid 45, 46, 47% utilization. So the question we're asking is, we know, as we've discussed before, there was upward pressure on rates, right? And rates are driven by, or bills are driven by rates times usage. And so what we're trying to look at is what things can we do? Again, so this is, we're giving you, a work in process, just some of the things we're thinking about. in the case, so you look at that chart in the middle there, and that basically is on the left-hand side is load in terms of hourly load, megawatt hours. Across the bottom are hours. The left hand is 1 o'clock in the morning. The middle of that chart is noon, and the right-hand side is midnight again. So you see on the left-hand side, that's basically the middle of the night. Each one of those lines is a different month of the year. This is actual customer data. So this is 500 actual residential customers in 2019. While the thing is shifted, we'll do another analysis of it for 2024 timeframe. But the peak is always, well, currently the peak in that time frame has always been late afternoon. And the interesting element about peaks is those peaks define our capacity and transmission cost. And as you guys on the left-hand side there, you can see the cost categories: capacity, transmission, certificates, energy, and operating cost. Operating cost is the building and the employees, et cetera. And what happens with the peak is what the peak does, it doesn't just change, it doesn't just affect that hour. It basically sets a ratchet that carries out for all 87, 60 hours of the year. So we are highly incented to make sure that we clip the peaks as best we can. However, in the non-peak hours, all hours except for the 13 out of 8,760, we're rethinking, like, if we want to keep rates down, then we want to basically utilize our fixed capacity at a higher level. And so what that table is, just this is food for thought. We haven't digested this all the way, but we ran a simple model. That middle column there, and this is load and net rate analysis during non-peak hours, not the 13 hours. So our typical load, residential load, is 820 kilowatt hours a month. And if we assume, and we just did 3 scenarios, let's assume that it's 20% higher and 20% lower. And what does that do to the cost structure? So we know that capacity during those non-peak hours, capacity and transmission is fixed, right? Because we set that during the peak hour. We know that operating is fixed because we have, as long as we stay, you know, somewhere between 45 and 70% of capacity, we know that the only variable is going to be energy. And as you can see in there, energy is 28 out of the 143. All said and done, that lower left-hand corner box is the net rate, dollars per kilowatt hour. So our base is roughly 18 cents, 18.3 cents a kilowatt hour. That ties to what we are roughly right now. But if we were to add a 20% usage during non-peak hours, and we basically spread that usage because it's just variable cost or incremental cost, it would basically have a more than 10% decrease in our rate. So we're trying to think through back to the incentives. Again, we're sharing with you. We're trying to think carefully. What behavior are we trying to change? We know we need to clip peaks, but what are we doing in the other non-peak hours? So
Can I ask a quick question?
yes, sure, please.
Is this basically an argument against the public communications because we're throwing the, while we're clipping the 1 hour, we're also losing all this load in the hours around it?
No.
Okay.
Looking at capacity utilization of the network is what we're trying to look at. And we're trying to go back to the rate. There's upward pressure on rate. So we're trying to, like, what can we do to maximize rate? And one of the elements we came back to is, look, we've got a fixed asset here. And just like a manufacturing plant, like if everybody can have capacity, can we basically add more volume through it and reduce the unit cost? That's
So how do you incentivize people not to charge their cars between 4 and 8 p.m.? How do you incentivize people not to use their washing machines and their dishwashers? You're not going to be able to incentivize them not to cook dinner, but you're trying to push. How do you incentivize to do those choice time activities
But we don't.
But
we don't. So back to that point, Pam, we actually don't mind if they move that load to a different time of the day.
That's what I mean. Yeah. Charge your car at 1 in the morning. Don't
Talk to people.
So
you're telling all your large manufacturing facilities and industrial companies to stop working from midnight till 8 a.m. Right? I mean, that's really that's
Well,
a lifestyle
Well,
change.
that's not a choice. I guess I was
Yeah.
thinking, this is like, how can you identify things that could happen any time of day? And instead of having to like incentivize them to do them at times that are
so
off peak.
what we committed to do, well, we committed to ourselves, but also to share with you, how are we going to revise our incentive program? What are we trying to incent? So we want to clip peaks, we went back to like, ask some basic assumptions. As we talked about before, our top 50 commercial and industrial customers represent half of our load, right? Half of our load. Now, Bob, back to your point. So I've got some experience with one of the other MLPs, right? And so they had an alloy, basically they were a foundry, still are, they still exist. And so what that MLP did, Braintree, is they set their rates up so that there was a penalty for running after 4 o'clock. They basically just shifted their operation. Instead of starting at 8 o'clock, they started at 6 o'clock in the morning. I'm not saying to run overnight, and it's not going to work for everybody. We did have a chance to sit down with our largest customer 2 weeks ago. They run their plant, they're a semiconductor fab plant, so they're not changing anything, right? I mean, we haven't got on. I don't, it's not going to be all third shift type stuff. But when we think about, at the end of the day, how can we think out of the box in terms of changing the behavior? And, there's the new load that's coming in EV, and that you can change, like, because we haven't established the behavior yet. So, and we've talked about this several times, let's make it inexpensive overnight and make it, dirt cheap in the evening. I mean, make it expensive late afternoon and very expensive overnight. We want to be careful about doing that, because when the adoption gets to, we put that chart up a few months ago, by 2040, our overnight load is 3 times our daytime load. Not good, right? We want the load to be as flat as we possibly can. We had the discussions earlier this week, and I shared this with you before, with the AMI vendors. And so this goes back to the time of use stuff. We're trying to make sure we choose a platform that allows us to do time of use, but almost real time. Our working assumption is our customers really don't pay a lot of attention. Most of our customers don't pay attention to electric bill because the lights are always on, right? We have a really good reliability status right now, and the bills are affordable. Not for everybody, but the majority of them, like, so just, I've got other things to worry about. Electricity is fine, don't bother me. We're still trying to figure out ways to modify customer behavior within certain ranges without them caring about it. So we don't have that all figured out, but there's a lot of interesting things in our discussion with the 3 AMI vendors that came in, of things that we might be able to do. So it ties into this. We don't have it all figured out yet, but we're trying to tell you guys is, how do we, at the end of the day, what's the key driver? It's what's the net cost to a customer, make sure the lights are on, and then obviously make sure it's not carbon. So we're hitting all these pieces. This has been, we've got more work to do on this analysis, but this is a little bit out of the box. Yeah, go ahead.
So Greg, this is good information. Thank you. What should, like, to Pam's point, what should the takeaway be from this slide for us today?
I think the takeaway, Vivek, is, we like energy efficiency programs. We're gonna promote them, as particularly on the commercial industrial side, as much as we possibly can. We haven't found any interesting ways to do that. I think the key takeaway, Vivek, is we're thinking about how do we impact the net rate. It's in that green box in the other left-hand corner, dollars per kilowatt hour. People can use whatever they're going to use when they want to use it, but the rate structure, this was intended to focus on incentives. We're preparing to do another rate study. It's another 3-year period to do another rate study, and so we're kind of rethinking. So the takeaway is we're thinking out of the box, but this is not a final list. We're not making a recommendation yet.
Will the time come for time of use metering for all residential customers? Is that sometime in the future?
Very future.
I mean,
So,
that's the only way I think you'll really affect this.
yeah, but it's also going to be, Ken, don't lose your thought, Reed. It's going to be how we actually, what the ability of the metering system to do that is going to be a foundational base, right? And so that's part of the evaluation we're doing right now with the AMI selection process. How we apply it is what we're starting about, how we put rates against it, et cetera. Because even if you've got a variable time of use rate, as long as the bill's not crazy, but most of our customers aren't gonna pay a lot of attention.
But that assumption's gonna change.
I think you're probably right, Ray, is at
Is
some
that-
point, when that bill gets up to, whatever the number gets to be, $200 to $300.
As soon as you put your first heat pump in and buy your first electric car, how much you care about your electric bill is gonna change.
Yeah.
And so I agree, right now, when you only see a 50 or $100, $200 electric bill, you go like, oh, it's summer, I put the AC on, like, yeah, okay, no big deal. You see a $400 winter bill, you're gonna go, oh, maybe I can do something to offset that. So
But Ray, what you're not seeing is you're not seeing the natural gas bill, right? You're not seeing the natural gas, you're not
Good.
seeing
Understood.
$100
No,
natural gas bill. So you have to optimize it that way too.
I don't care about my oil bill, the gas bill anymore, because I don't have it
They
anymore.
don't exist.
Yeah, no, but you gotta know.
$400 coming out of my electric bill. So now I'm caring about my electric bill.
I think there's
So yes, you're right. Oh, absolutely. There's the net benefit already. And that I convinced myself of that net benefit to do the changeover to begin with.
great case.
Now that I've bought into the changeover, now I'm looking at a $400 or $500 electric bill. And so now I'm open to things that I can do to affect that. Yeah, I mean, there's savings and then there's more savings and then there's some more savings. So how much what can I do on that? Where the compatibility is that we also want to affect behavior. We also want you to buy electricity from certain times. So there's two incentives. There's the incentive of the person who will now care that their electric bill is more manageable and that we care when they buy that power. So
when they use that power.
when they use
We gotta
that
buy
power,
it. You're exactly right.
when they draw.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I would just caution that no one cares. I think they will care. And I think being able to say
Not the proper choice of words. At the end of the day, what we have learned is we want to make it as easy as possible for the customers to respond and change.
correct.
Make it easy for them. And so those are the kind of things we're looking at with back to some of the AMI systems that have got some capabilities to do stuff in background mode. So
The only thing I think we always have to keep in mind is rate structures should not be punitive for people that maybe didn't adopt, right? If you did, it's gonna be a 20, 25, 30-year transition, right?
Oh, it is.
And you don't need to be punishing someone who does get home at 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. The kids get home, TV goes on, oven goes on. Now I'm not saying start your electric dryers, turn on your dishwasher.
Yeah,
But I think energy consumption goes up because everybody's using it, right? You want to make sure that your rate structure is not punitive for everybody, and time of use is punitive at peak times. It really,
Depends on your
it is. I mean, it is by, you're using more, but if we up our rate, rate structure for pure time of use, you have to take into account that, there's not everyone can adapt their lifestyle. And
so on that note, so again, we're discussing and looking and exploring. The other element is, are there things that we can do in our network to time shift when we purchase the power and when the customer uses the power? And so we talked a couple months ago, and we'll give an update on it soon, is that Form Energy project, right? And what's different about that Form Energy project, it is a 100-hour battery system, not a 2-hour battery system. So while the existing system we're putting in place are focused on the peaks, this Form thing is more of it's more of a time shifting mechanism. So we're the modeling that Form and Bill's team has been working on there said, hey, the reason why we've continued to push forward on it, because it's not perfect, but it's going to create a different element where we can actually time shift customers. So back to your point of not being punitive, we haven't got it all figured out yet, but we're trying to look at all these different elements. Back to your point, right? The monthly bill is going to go up, right? There's only upward pressure on it because the usage is going to increase and the rates are going to increase. And so all we're looking at here is like, hey, what levers can we pull on rates? We haven't got it all figured out yet. We know in territory generation for all the economic reasons. However we do it, right? There's logic. This gets into the incentives in terms of what kind of behaviors we're trying to drive and what pieces of equipment we want people to adopt. We love air source heat pumps because we think that ultimately It benefits the people that put the air source heat pump in and all the other ratepayers. Everybody wins. EV is a little bit different. Air source heat pump, everybody wins, whether you bought one or not. You're better off if I'll stop there. So
Thank you for that. The prompt that I had given was more specific to this week, which is the heat wave week, because we had a forecast last week of back-to-back 100-degree days.
Yep.
And I read that ISO New England was predicting today would be the peak so far this year, which means unless we get another big blast of a heat wave on a business day, it might well have been the annual peak today. Might be, we don't know. But if it is true that it was the peak today as of the year so far, it's a contender for the annual peak.
Yeah.
So the question I had was to walk us through what measures did RMLD take to prepare for this heat wave, and what happened, what was done, what was communicated, what buttons did you push to educate the board, to CAB, new board members of what did RMLD do?
Yeah.
So there used to be a communication strategy that consisted not only of group emails, but enlisting towns to say things. Even I've gotten reverse 911 calls a couple times over the years. Sometimes when it's really a bad day, that gets implemented. So what was done this week?
Yeah. So we're at a transition point on our communication, our public communication. But what we did do yesterday and today is we ran our generator, which was 2.5 megawatt
Which
reduction.
happens regularly, right? Yeah.
Rock solid, always works 90% time. And then we also ran our battery. So
Right.
So we have one 5 megawatt battery system. So in parallel, so what we didn't do today, because we don't have the other 20 megawatts of battery systems in place, but that's not part of it. That's a key piece of why we're putting that additional 20 megawatts in. So, part of the challenge in terms of battery system is where you put them,
right?
How you connect them to the network, et cetera. So we are strong proponents of battery systems because, as we talked about before, and what I didn't finish doing on this analysis, Dave, was the second step, which is, the 50% of our load is the top 50 customers. And there's one that has the ability, from their process perspective, to make adjustments.
So who did what today?
So none of I don't know of any of our customers. So we were not successful in terms of communicating to our customer today to say it's a peak day.
Why not? Just tell us what usually happens and what didn't happen today.
Usually, we have an email program that goes out, and we don't have a communication manager or a marketing manager hired yet. We didn't get it done today because as we went to go do that, we uncovered that our constant contact
the email vendor or the password is what?
So
you didn't know the
password. So anyways, it issues administratively that we will fix next week. But it's our internal fault for not doing as much as we possibly could.
So the mass email didn't go out.
Correct.
Do we do tweets? Do we let the town halls know to post or do anything? Or
we did none of that today, Dave. The only we did is we ran our generator and we ran our battery system.
My wife commented she was surprised she didn't get it.
Yeah, well, that's
that's a positive.
That's a good point.
That's a positive in the sense that people have been getting the message to shave the peak, and they were looking for that feedback to respond. Now, we had limited things that we could do.
Yeah,
but nevertheless,
I think the other
commented that was missing.
So part of this goes back to we talked about shave the peak program or shred the peak program. When it got introduced in 2016, 2017, it was pretty effective, but it has not been very effective since then. So one of the other things we're trying to do is how do we change that?
Change what?
The shred the peak program.
Effectiveness.
We have a program, whether we communicate it or not. In the past, we've had very little participation, and if they happen to drop load, it was by coincidence, not by design. So we have not yet taken the time to update that program. But when I say program, the shred, the whole strategy behind it. The current structure is not effective. So we have among independent of the communication stuff, and even if we did communicate it, it would not have merited much because it hasn't historically. So our first step is really to fix the shred the peak program. And since it's summer, this is the appropriate time to do that.
Two things. One is sometimes when we tell customers that the bill that you get is in part based on when we get our peak power, sending out a message, shred the peak, may not give you the reduction in power, but it sends the message that when you get your bill and we talk about peak power, it was these days.
Yeah.
And so there's a communication about a link between which days affect us and which days don't. Maybe you respond to that, maybe you don't, but it's part of an overall communication of when you get your bill and what things about your bill are upward driving light rates. You know, when we say shred the peak, it was because of those events. You heard us say these events are happening, still part of that messaging. I want to also say, Ken, is there software tools that exist? And I said we want to create it. We're not creating a software department here at RMLD that can give the customer, I want to say, the illusion of control, in the sense that it will pull data from a variety of different places and allow them to see what's happening for them or within the system, or how they might be able to make a decision about energy use on a platform.
Meter data.
Some sort of feedback. I mean, I want to say illusion of control because it might not actually push a button on your phone and actually change a device, but it might give them enough idea of system-wide demands going up, my individual time of use meters going up. How much can we give back to the customer in terms
So
of
if we're looking at
feedback?
customer segment in terms of what we do, Bill reminded me, in addition to the AMI system, we are partially implemented with an MDM system as a meter data management system. Part of that meter data management system includes a customer portal. We haven't pulled the trigger to open that customer portal, but that'll be another mechanism in terms of being able to communicate with the customer. Every residential customer will have access to it should they decide to go after it. We've got a program, so we're ready to move forward on a mobile app, again, off the shelf type stuff. So those will be all elements. Newsletters are good. I think the other element, though, that in talking with other public power entities around the country that was the most successful was the guy that basically sent a text at the end of today and said, hey, you dropped X, Y, or Z. You earned $1, you earned $2. Tomorrow, it would have been yesterday. And then tomorrow, and so today, hey, tomorrow's going to be 100 days. So, you know, see if you can do better to another $1 or $2. We have to work through the mechanics of that.
Yeah,
There's different pieces that, you know, every customer segment has a different level of ability to drop load.
How we all feeling? Another hour and a half?
Again, sorry, I just had one comment. Actually, Greg, I think you answered my question. I said, you know, the slide you have on the screen, it talks about our load and how we're thinking about it. And I was just wondering, you know, there's so many other utilities across the country and so many munis that are all grappling with the same issue. So what have we learned from them? I think you touched upon some of it, but is there anything more that, looking at this chart, and are you comparing notes with other people? I'm sure you are, but I just, you know, if you could give us a sense of how you're thinking about it in the context of what others are also doing.
So, yes, is the answer to the question, to learn from what other people are doing. Bill and Ben had a chance. Bill and Ben Blumenthal had a chance to attend the APPA conference last week. So they're collecting their notes in terms of what they learned as well. We'll be happy to share that with you guys at the next meeting as well. So okay. Yes, you know, we are, you know, I think as you guys know, us as an organization and me specifically, we are open to input and suggestions. You know, we're trying to learn and make it better. So to answer your question, we're digesting stuff we got back last week. We have not implemented yet.
Thank you.
You want to?
One thing is, like, it goes back to what Ray said, and I never thought about it until Ray said it. It comes down to demand management, and it has to come down to not thinking about it. So when he talked about putting a giant loop in a neighborhood and things like that, that's when you can cause effect and make change. But when I have to go home and turn my AC off and not do the normal things I do, it makes it very difficult. But you have that program from the meters. We have the 3 biggest buildings in town with the tangent system.
Yeah.
I can go in and get a graph of what my usage was for each day, for a week, for a month. And I also can get ambient temperature. And I watch this happen. My temperature goes up, my kilowatt usage goes up. And when it goes down, it goes down. And same in the winter. And it's just amazing how it works, but I can't change what's going on because I can't stop the public safety building from running 24 hours a day. I can't stop a school from having events at night. So it's all those different things you look at, and soon we'll have 2 electric buildings. And so all those things are going to increase, but it's also going to follow that peak. So my usage is higher in the day, but at night I'm still using more when I'm not going to not have meetings in those buildings. I'm not use them.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to watch the weather really
Yeah,
control it all.
we're getting more and more data, and how do we apply that data? And again, we're gonna hope, there'll be a whole bunch of different, like everybody, so back to the next, people are trying different pieces. But the time shifting piece is the one, if you want to make it, again, the core piece, make it as easy for our customers to do load, which means they don't do anything, right? They basically say, hey, we'll give you, here are the parameters that you can play with in my load. You can go between, 68 and 78. You can adjust my water heater between X and Y temperature. You can charge my EV or discharge my, whatever they work. I mean, we've got an idea of what it looks like, but stay within that and let me know how well we did.
Yep.
We'll be doing it at the end of the day. It'll be an expert system. But that's ultimately, we think, where we're going. Because again, make it easy as possible for the customer to participate. And the other element we've got, which is a benefit, we have a broad set of customers, right? School's going to operate differently than public safety, than a residential home, than semiconductors. So anyways, more work to be done.
We good?
We good? I'm good.
We good?
I
Bob?
have one question before we close. But it's, I'll wait.
You can go
Have to get them
back to the next.
It's on the financials, but I don't know if they're there yet.
So in the.
Oh, I thought we were through the agenda already.
Yeah,
No?
we are.
Yeah, I don't think
It's on the thing. So on the financials, where we look at our current year to date and we get down to our power expenses. So it's on page 2 of the 5. Right? We had a.
You look at slide 68 or 69. 68. Look at the upper right hand corner. What's the date? What's the slide?
I don't have one of those. Well,
So
second,
the one that came in the package is what you're saying?
one of the very last pages in the package, on the appendix.
Yeah. So this is basically results through the end of March.
Yeah, so page 2,
Yep. Go ahead.
and the our purchase power went up 50% from last year, significant jump. So I guess I'm wondering why our power fuel charge has gone up so high this year, relatively speaking, guess, is that a pass through? What's going on in that particular one for purchases? Is it a straight pass through, or did we do something different? Because I don't think prices are that significantly different from this year to last year. So why is that one jumping off the page?
Keep in mind that's a net mix. And so the biggest piece of that is that hydro became a bigger piece of the portfolio. In that this is the first 3 months, and hydro is more expensive than natural gas. Natural gas was low, but we are hedged. This is what we're talking about before. We might leave money on the table. We're trying to dampen. I mean, these are straight expenses, and we haven't done any magical changes to our power supply portfolio.
Yeah, capacity.
No, this is just fuel. He just got
The purchase power fuel, right?
You just got fuel.
That's fuel, right? That seems like a straight, that's energy.
Well, the other element is this winter was colder, so it's both the rates and it's also the amount. So remember last year we were 3% lower. We're now 3% higher. So we did less energy purchases in 2022 year to date than we did in 2023 year to date.
This is 23 versus 24, right?
I'm sorry, 23 versus 24. Forgive me.
Yeah. It's just a big, just that one seemed to jump off the page, because that's a big change. That's $3 million.
Did we shift anything from capacity into purchase power?
Well, I'm looking at that number. I'll double check it.
The capacity went down 27%.
I see that now.
That should be relatively the same.
Should be flat.
Yeah.
Well, it's tied to usage.
Yeah.
We'll go back and take a look at it.
Okay, that's all.
scheduling, we good with the upcoming 2 meetings?
Yeah.
No changes? Okay. Maybe at the next meeting, we could just walk us through what is the updated or the newly implemented communications plan for a peak day. And if it happened to fall between now and July 25th, maybe let us know like what happened. Like what were you able to do when you got the warning from ISO New England of a projected peak? Like what did the department do? So would be a nice report to get.
Sounds great.
So I think that leaves us with the most important motion of the day.
Move that the Citizen Advisory Board adjourn regular session. Roll call vote.
Second. Ken Walter, I.
Jason Small, aye.
Tim Woods, aye.
Dennis Kelly, aye.
Vivek Soni, aye.
Tyler Levin.
Move that the Board of Commissioners adjourn regular session.
Second.
All in favor?
Ms. Pacino, I.
Talbot, aye.
What are I?
Black is aye.
This concludes the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you all.